Hi, I'm Kathleen Cooke, host of the Influence Women podcast. I'm excited to have you with us today and having our presenter today, Janet Craig. She is a veteran filmmaker and has just finished her film, Wake Up, about the sex trafficking industry. How do we film sensitive material and content? Janet's going to talk to us about how we can fight against this horrific problem that's pervasive in not only our country, America, but around the world. So stay tuned, like us and subscribe to us, ring that notification bell. We want to see this film spread throughout our world and culture today. We want to fight trafficking of children. Stay with us for the Influence Women podcast coming up next. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Influence Women podcast again. I'm so excited to have Janet Craig with us. She's an amazing filmmaker. And Janet, it's so fun to have you with us on the Influence Women podcast today.
Well, I'm so grateful to be here. I thank you for doing these podcasts. I've learned from watching them. So,
oh, well, wonderful. I was just recently returning from Spain, and we had some filmmakers from all over Europe come together. And I was so excited and encouraged to hear this Romanian filmmaker said, I saw your podcast already, and it's just really encouraged my life. So I thought, yes, we're doing the right thing, and we're really on the right page with what God and our culture and our female filmmakers out there need, and globally. So I know, Janet, the words of your mouth and the meditations of your heart, that's your prayer for today, as is mine. And so we're excited to have you today. So I want to tell our audience just a little bit about you, but and then maybe you tell us a little bit more about who you are in that journey. But I know you came from a theatrical background. You've been spent a lot of time in Arizona originally, but now living in Los Angeles. And you co-wrote and directed a film called Wake Up about it's an anti-sex trafficking film that's kind of focused more on the foster care issues and where they are taking young girls and young boys at this point out of the foster care program and capturing them and putting them into sex trade. So this is an award-winning film that you have been working on. You've been an independent filmmaker for many, many years, and you've had a big journey here with collaborating with many incredible filmmakers and mentors yourself. So that's just a little bit about what we're going to be talking about, but tell us really in your own words a little bit more about your journey.
About my journey. Wow. So I always wanted to be an actor. I loved performing. I liked singing as a kid. I wanted to be a clown at one point, so I had a unicycle, but I loved performing. So anytime I got an opportunity as a child, I was a theater major in college. But I think the main thing is storytelling. And I think one of the things I recognized in wanting to perform, wanting to do those things, is I wanted to put myself in someone else's shoes, to have empathy for someone else, to feel what it's like to live a different story. I'm so jealous of you traveling the world, because when I was young, my parents took me to England. My dad was an attorney, and one of his clients was an actor, Stuart Granger, and his daughter gave us a tour of London. And I remember just my senses were so alive with the beefeaters and going up and down elevators where you had to close a gate. And I would we went to Switzerland also, smelling the chocolate and looking at the different things. And so we went to the Tower of London, and history came alive. I saw where Anne Boleyn had her head cut off, and I went to Westminster Abbey, and history came alive for me. And I thought, wow, if we can, that's how I learn. I learn by experience. So I wanted to just tell stories and be engaged in storytelling. I don't love academics. I do love learning.
Yes,
sitting in a classroom.
A woman after my own heart. I love academics, but on my own terms.
Yeah, so I always liked recess and art and music better than anything else at school. So I geared myself towards those. And I had the privilege of playing professional tennis, so I got to travel around the world playing tennis. And when I graduated from college, it was either go on the tennis tour or go to Broadway. I still want to go to Broadway. That's on my bucket list. Either go to New York. But I'm from, as you mentioned, I grew up in Arizona, and it was hard to live in. I lived in Massachusetts for a couple of years, and I just love the sunshine. So I thought, better go to LA. And there's for film and television more, but we also have great theater out here. I got involved in the theater when I moved out here. So I got injured at the Australian Open in 1988.
Wow.
And then shortly thereafter, after being a singing waitress for a short period in Arizona, I came out and got my SAG card, worked on a soap opera first. In those days, to get your SAG card, you had to have a speaking role. Now it's changed. Now I think you can be a background actor for a little bit and get your SAG card. But in those days, you had to have a speaking role. So I got that. And I just love being on set, and I love being with people. And I think one of the things I love about filmmaking so much is it's a collaborative art. So
Yes.
you can
Yes.
never, I love as an actor being free to perform on a stage, because that's really an actor's medium, right? The
Right.
director directs you, the writer writes this incredible play, and then you're put together with these people to collaborate as actors, but the actors do it together. And then with film and television, it's the cinematographers, it's the production design, it's the costumes, and the sound matters so much, and all these other things. And so you bring all these artists, all these creatives together with all different perspectives and all different ways of being, and you tell stories about the world and
Yes.
use your imagination. So for me, it's just a playground. I love my work, and that's sort of, I've just stuck to it. After I got my SAG card, I never healed completely to go back on the tour and kept working. So that's been my journey.
Wow, wow, love it. And I love how you really hit on collaboration. It's one of the reasons we have Influence Women, is so that we can create events, have podcasts like this, ongoing webinars and teachings online, and just gatherings in which we can connect and be able to collaborate. Because if you look at the end of a film scroll or a television series or whatever, you see all of the names of people that had to come together in order to make that. And how do we do that? How can we do that as filmmakers and collaborators who are like-minded, who have a biblical foundation and a biblical worldview of wanting to share love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, all the fruits of the Spirit, we call them in our faith, and what Jesus called them in the Bible. And how do we create those stories that can resonate and change our culture? You know, one of our taglines for Influence Women is change the media, change the culture, and that we can do it through storytelling. So I love how God pulls you in. And I love the fact that you came from an athletic point of view. You know, I think in many ways, being a filmmaker is a marathon race, isn't it? And certainly with the film that you just done, that I'd love to talk about next, Wake Up. Tell us about that journey, how that film came to being, how you found that material, and just tell us about that marathon journey that you're still on with that film.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I do want to say something about that, the Influence Women. I'm so grateful for this organization because I'm part of a multimedia repertory company of actors called The Collaborative. But to find a group of people that have faith as their core, to find a group of people that in Influence Women, I found that group through Hollywood Prayer Network, because I was looking for people that also wanted to use all their gifts and talents to glorify God. And it's such an industry of whatever we make, whatever we do has an impact. Media is so powerful. As you know, you run around the world showing people how to make things for their ministries. And with your media alliance and all of the stuff that you're training in, I think it's so important that our stories help the world rather than hurt the world. And I think there's so much material out there that's not great. And so I was looking for like-minded people to collaborate with. While these actors that I work with at the Collaborative are some of the most talented, and many of them are in my film and worked with me on the project, extremely gifted artists. But much of the content that they want to create is not content that I want to be a part of. And so it becomes this thing of, while it is a collaborative thing, I have to make sure I'm making projects only for the glory of the Lord. Because otherwise, why are we here? I mean, we're supposed to be here to use our gifts and talents to glorify God, to shine for Him, so that others will be saved and others will know, and to help people, the hurting.
Right,
So
that's the Great Commission, isn't it? That's what
yeah,
Jesus called is our Great Commission. We're commissioned with this. So
yeah.
great.
So,
Yeah.
but with Wake Up, I think what was so sweet for me with Wake Up is I was it came on the heels of my seeing a woman tell her story. And I went to an event. It was called Forever Found, and it's an organization, excuse me, that fights trafficking. And at the Forever Found event, my young daughter, who was 16 at the time, invited us, my husband and myself, to go on her birthday, her 16th birthday, because she'd heard about sex trafficking happening. And this was an anti-trafficking organization having their very first event. And I sat in that room hearing this amazing woman tell her story of being trafficked. And I thought, I have to do something. I wanted to bring the whole world into that room because it's the first time I had heard someone in person. And by hearing her story in person, I didn't know that much about trafficking at the time. And hearing her in person impacted me so profoundly. And I thought, if the whole world was in here hearing her, they'd all feel like I do. We have to do something. And I thought, well, I'm a movie maker. I'm an actor. At the time, that was in my mind, an actor. I'll act in something to help. So I was thinking, I'll commission someone to write something and I'll act in a movie to help. So God has a funny sense of humor. And I think that as we are, all of us have our own testimony. So what happened for me is I was at a prayer meeting for foster youth, and I really sensed the Lord telling me that I was to make a movie about foster care. Well, flashback a couple of years, I had heard this woman's story and had been planning to somehow get into it. Well, in America, foster youth are the most exploited. Over 65% of those who have been trafficked come through the foster care system in America. So it became a movie.
65%. Let's hear that statistic again. That's
over 65% of those being trafficked in America come through the foster care system. So my husband and I adopted our fourth child through foster care. And so we have a particular passion. And we were at a meeting about foster care because we were at a church with all these foster families. And this man who loves to fight for the orphan and those that are exploited had this prayer meeting saying, God's called a whole bunch of foster communities together. And so we want to do something. And from that prayer meeting, I was commissioned to make this film. And it was interesting because I first hired writers because I didn't consider myself a writer. But I believe the Lord wrote it for me because I ended up writing it. And then I had a friend who's an ex-LAPD, who's an actual writer, who came on board as my co-writer. He came through. I wanted him to look at I never like to watch things where you get it wrong. So if you're talking about police work, I wanted to have it be accurate. So I had him look for that. And he said, do you want me to kind of write some other stuff and do some character development? So we collaborated, and it became a man's view and a woman's view of the same thing. Someone who was on the streets helping rescue kids in person, and someone who had been training. After I went to that meeting with that young woman, I started training and learning how to help, how to fight trafficking. I started donating and getting involved and volunteering, started mentoring a girl through that organization who had been trafficked. And I also started doing things with just all the learning I could do, meeting with people that were on the front lines that were rescuing all over the world and all those kinds of things. So anyway, that's how it became a story. And then my biggest question in writing this movie was, why is it a multi-billion-dollar industry who is buying? And so what I wanted to do is not make a documentary. I wanted to make a film that was inspired by true events, but would reach a larger audience. So I wanted a crime thriller or suspense thriller. I like things with twists and turns.
Sure, more fun. It's got to be entertaining, I think. Films
Absolutely
still have to be entertaining.
Yeah. And
as dark as some of the subject matter is, it still has to be entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I realized when I pulled back the curtain is that it comes from addiction. It comes from sex addiction. It comes from porn addiction. That's why we have buyers. We have a multi-billion-dollar industry of people buying kids. Who's buying? And they're everywhere. They're in every neighborhood in America, every neighborhood across the globe, wherever we go. When we were talking earlier today, Kathleen, about the people in Ukraine that have been captured and that, they've been kidnapped and exploited and kids have been taken, it's happening everywhere. So these stories are not just unique to any particular place. So ours is an international story, but we're basing it in what's going on in America. So this crime thriller is about America, and I wanted to show what's happening.
And I'm going to intersect this too. America is one of the biggest proliferators of sex trafficking. America. It's not some little tiny country, or it's not, an outside world country that we would think would be maybe associated with that. But America is at the top of the list.
Yeah, it is. And we're the biggest buyers. So we're traveling all over the world to buy. And it's not who you think, what I've learned is you know, God gives us a testimony in life. And I didn't realize why this was my story to tell. As an actor, I'd been turning down a lot of projects and I thought, this is so frustrating. I love working. So when I would get a film offer where I didn't even have to audition, but they were going to give me the opportunity to be in a lesbian love scene, being bludgeoned in a bathtub naked. And I'm like, why? Why are we making this content? I don't want to see it. I don't want it made. I don't want to be in it, but I love working. So this came perfectly, you know, God always knows. And I didn't realize it was my story. When I wrote this story, I didn't realize how much of it was my story. But as I look back, I grew up in a home with friends and family that were struggling with addiction when I was a kid. So I understand addiction. So I have a heart for addicts. If we have over 50% of pastors watching pornography, police officers, teachers, law, you know, we have all
Yeah.
these judges and everybody
Regular
watching
people,
pornography.
we think, right? Just normal
Right.
people. Yeah.
Well, and what I realize with pornography and I realize with this sex addiction thing I'm talking about is we're putting these phones in 7-year-olds' hands.
Right.
And if you are on Instagram or one of these, you will see inappropriate content. If you're watching regular television nowadays, you know, you're going to see content that I wish wasn't on there because you're watching people naked having sex on television. Like it's not, we are making it really difficult for people that want to be pure, that want to stay pure. We're making it tough on men who God designed to either be predators or protectors. And if we keep forcing men out, I love fighting for women's rights, but I also believe we need to lift up our men. You know, God gave us
Absolutely.
men as
Yes.
leaders. And I feel like we need to recognize that they're protectors and they want to be protectors. They want a purpose. And they will be either a predator or protector because they are wired. They're hardwired for that. So I just feel like there are women who are buying as well, but it's the masses are men. And also we're finding now there are addicts that started at 7 who are now 12. They've been addicted to pornography for 5 years. And the way pornography works with high-speed internet porn, different from when it was in magazines, it literally rewires the brain like any drug would. So it's as addictive as heroin. So on that note,
Yes.
stay
And
off
this is all
that.
stuff we need to know that
Yeah,
we, you know, sometimes we get in our little bubble of our little family and our world and even our Christian bubble, where we just haven't been out in the world to
yeah,
understand how this is really happening. And so I love what you're sharing today and helping us, as your film says, wake up.
yeah, yeah. I hope that it'll encourage people so that our purpose in making this film, we're going to give 100% of anything we make to 3 organizations that I've been part of. One is Forever Found, one is Zoe International. Those are both anti-trafficking organizations. And another, which is also a producing partner of ours, is Raising Hope. And that's for foster youth in Ventura County. But she's an attorney that works in LA County as well, who founded it. And they're helping. So foster youth get emancipated. A lot of times they'll leave somebody's home at 18 and they're on their own. So you're going to find that many foster youth, you know, are being exploited, and we want to really come around. So any of the proceeds will go to these 3 amazing Christ-centered organizations that are on the front lines. And we did it also so that we could help other organizations around the globe that are doing great work. So what we want is, as the movie is shown, people to be able to plug in immediately with these
Right.
nonprofits. So I'll talk a
Yeah,
little
I
bit
work
about
on the National Salvation Army board, as you know, and we took Influence Women one night. We had an event down on Hollywood Boulevard at their core office down there in Hollywood, right next door, almost to the Pantages Theater, right in the middle of Hollywood on the Walk of Fame, the whole thing. And they feed about 500 homeless men and women off the street 3 times a week there. So we went down, helped feed the homeless one night, and then had our event, our Influence Women event gathering afterwards. But one of the things I learned more than anything is that particular core services young teens pretty much young people from the ages of 13 to 18 who have either run away from the foster care program or have been aged out. And that's their biggest population. They're on the street, homeless by themselves, and so vulnerable to trafficking. And so I know there's lots of organizations that I believe your film Wake Up can actually help as well, and help us be educated to understand where we need to be praying, where we need to be supporting, and how we can create more projects that can make more people wake up like you've done.
Yeah, and I wanted to share for your viewers that are movie makers or are involved in nonprofits or involved in helping. There's an organization called Gather that we're partnering with for the movie. And what it does is it allows you to have either virtual screenings with panels or live screenings with panels. They have deals with 3,000 theaters across the country, 20,000 screens. And then they also have a TVOD. So if you're a movie maker, you can have it stream, which is pay per view. So you can have them rent. And what you can do is your movie can be embedded on the websites of those organizations that you want to benefit from your film. So you can offer your film, let's say, to the Salvation Army. And that, if Wake Up went on the Salvation Army website, anytime someone rented Wake Up, it would give money toward the Salvation Army. And also the Salvation Army can have a donate button there and for people to get more involved. And then once they saw the film, if they had a heart to get involved, they're already able to plug in with an organization like the Salvation Army. So this is our option. And then what it does is it also allows you to choose panelists to have associated with your project. So let's say you're doing something in media, or you have some passion and you want people to understand, you can use Gather's platform to have your project and then these panelists. So we're allowing our cast and crew and these Christ-centered nonprofits that are on the front lines to be panelists, so subject matter experts. So Rachel Thomas, for instance, was on the National Advisory Board on Human Trafficking. She's a believer. She's an amazing survivor, speaker. She teaches ending the game and all this great curriculum to help people not get trafficked, to help understand how to keep your kids safe from trafficking. She has the Cool Aunt series, which is for young kids to watch so that they can understand how to keep themselves safe, and like a cool aunt talking to a 12-year-old.
Yes.
She has all this material because she was trafficked, and she's an amazing woman. Anyway, so she's in our film, and so she'll be one of our speakers that people could pick, and then each of the speakers can choose whether or not to be part of that event. And these can be global streaming events. So you could have it happening for all over. So Wake Up is now available that way. So people can go on our website, the official.
Okay, that's what my question next is. Tell us how we can get a hold of you, where we can get connected into that. I know that even if they forget all that, just to send us a note at info@influencewomen.org, and we'll get you connected to Janet. But tell us, Janet, where can we get connected into that?
So our website is going to be the main hub, which is officialwakeupmovie.com. So it's www.officialwakeupmovie.com. There are other Wake Up movies out there, so just remember official and movie at the end of Wake Up. And it will have, right now, Blu-ray and DVDs are for sale, with some fun bonus material. A lot of the streaming, or if you have a virtual event, you won't have our bonus material where you'll see actors' auditions that we put on there for actors. That's kind of fun. Behind the scenes, making of, but also we have our subject matter experts on our bonus material with training and things that you can use to avoid being trafficked, or if you have a porn addiction, resources to get involved. We have that on our website as well. So even if someone doesn't want to see the movie, which I think you should, because I'm hoping it'll impact you.
Of course.
You can go to that website and see the great organizations we're affiliated with. There's another movie making company, a guy named Benji Nolo, who's with Exodus Cry. We have them on our website because he makes documentaries, and I think they're about to make a narrative feature as well, one that's fictionalized. But he makes documentaries about the different aspects of how pornography is influencing our culture, and he does it for the porn makers, the porn buyers. He has one movie out there called Buying Her that I just saw that's so powerful, with 5 men that used to be buyers who now are on the front lines helping men get out of their addiction. I mean, there's just so much great stuff out there. There's so many people on the front lines, and law enforcement doing amazing stuff. Pure Desire Ministries helping women who've been betrayed and men who struggle with pornography. And then all these nonprofits that are on the front lines globally helping with rescue, restoration, all that kind of stuff. It's a
Great
trauma-enforced
resources.
therapy. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said great resources. Thank you for sharing all those. Yeah. And again, if they are not be able to grab all of those right away, please do send us a note at info@influencewomen.org. And Janet, one more time, where can they reach you?
Well, if you go to the officialwakeupmovie.com, you can actually also send an email there. You can be part of our mailing list.
Great.
And if you would want to talk to me individually, I know all of you influence women I would love to share with. Just contact me through that and let me know you're part of Influence Women, and give me your phone number, and we'll talk, we'll meet,
Awesome.
whatever.
So I want to move kind of forward to on a specific area too that I really wanted to talk about, and that is dealing with sensitive material in content. So when and in the process of filming, you had to deal with some real sensitive scenes. And I guess I bring this up because my daughter, who has come up in the industry, she's now a filmmaker and is directing her second film right now, and part of that. But as a young child, she was about 6, having an agent here in Los Angeles. And the agent called me one day and said, look, we're doing a film on a very sensitive subject about a father who abuses his child, slaps and abuses this child in this story. And I want to make sure that you're okay with me sending her out for this audition. And I said, well, let me get back with you. So I had to, sit down with Kelsey and talk to her about, now this is a story that's being told about a daddy who doesn't love his child the way your dad loves you, and would never hurt you or abuse you in any way, but this daddy does, because he has some real issues, and they want you to portray this person on set. Do you want to do that? She said, oh, mommy, she said, if it will help somebody else and help them see how they can get out of that and be saved from that, how God can help them through that, then yes, I want to audition for it. So I mean, what a mature thing she had said at this young age. But getting back to what you're doing with this sensitive material and having to portray that, especially not just from a documentary point of view, but a theatrical narrative point of view, where you have to show some of these scenes. How did you deal with some of that, and what would you recommend to some of our filmmakers out there in dealing with that?
Yeah. One of the things that really frustrates me, as we've talked about on this, is that people are using film to actually exploit people on film. So pornography, which I think is, the majority of people that you are watching, if you're watching pornography, have been trafficked. Rachel Thomas thinks it's about 98% of pornography is made with people who've been trafficked. And if there's any underage pornography, it's all being trafficked. So I wanted to make sure we didn't exploit anyone in the making of the film, because I'm making a film about not exploiting. And I took a lot of training on the verbiage, the things that you say that can actually be harmful or hurtful. One of the reasons I ended up directing this film, I acted in it. And so I was concerned about directing it as well, because when you're a director and actor, those are two completely different hats. And so in writing the film, I wrote some pretty edgy scenes, and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to direct this because I need to protect the viewers from what another director might do. And so, because I understood the sensitivity of the subject matter, and I think in any subject matter we need to be sensitive, I didn't show any nudity, even though there's a scene where someone is being exploited. All you do is you hear it. You hear something happening. You're watching a girl's reaction to hearing something going on in another room. We can do that as filmmakers. Our imaginations are wonderful. I think we show way too much in all that we make.
Absolutely.
I think
Yep.
when you look back at the older films where they allowed the imagination, it's way more impactful. And I've had people thank me when they've watched the film who've been trafficked and asked me to make their own stories. In fact, I have another film I'm making inspired by another man's story, who saw the film and said, will you please do my story? Because they feel validated, because I was careful with the language. I was careful with how I showed it. And one of my friends is a trauma therapist, and I had her look at the script and to share with me how I could show it so that I didn't trigger the audience and shut them down. Because when you're showing too much stuff, audiences will shut down. There was a movie Spotlight years ago about priests taking advantage of children in the Catholic Church, and they won an Oscar, I believe. And she said it was brilliant because of how they didn't traumatize the audience because of how little they showed. And so I took that to heart and said, I want my movie to be like that. I want to not have it exploiting anyone. And so when we shot, we had all of our actors wearing fully clothed. There wasn't even any immodest garb, because I don't want to titillate an audience that's watching who's struggling, because
Yeah.
men struggle with watching somebody that has on a crop top that can actually turn some guy on. And I didn't want any of that happening during our filming. I wanted it to be, you can still tell a story without having anything exploitive. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to make this. I wanted to do it in a way where we can say, hey guys, you can make a really exciting film, edge of your seat, crime thriller. People feel it. I mean, it's a gut punch.
Yeah.
And there's nothing exploitive, zero, which I was really grateful for.
And I love that, Janet, because I think you're right. I think sometimes when we have vices, things that we're addicted to, we are drawn to ways in which into these kind of films to watch, because we think, well, maybe I can justify what I'm doing, or maybe I can learn something to help me get to stop this pornography addiction I have, or the fact that I'm involved in all this. And so you do have a lot of followers and people watching these kind of films who are actually in the industry and actually doing it. And so showing that more and being more explicit is only going to feed into their desires more to go do it again, right? It's really kind of a psychological crazy thing that happens. I think and I have to talk to a psychologist about why that happens, but I love how you just handled it. I think it also adds an ability for families then to sit down and watch this kind of film together with some of their older children who can really understand what's happening without having to be compromised in nudity that's being shown, or such explicit things. Years ago, one of the first trafficked films I ever saw was at the Sundance Film Festival. We would take students from Biola University when I was teaching there. And the film was called Taken. And the opening shot of it was these girls flying in from South America to Mexico, which is what happens a lot with trafficking. From what I understand, they fly into Mexico and then they're smuggled over the border here into America. And one of the opening shots with these girls being excited, and they were going to be a part of this modeling agency that they'd been told they were going to be a part of. And they get in the car, and the opening scene, then all of a sudden they just grab them, and it's like swoosh, and they are, hooded and put down, and immediately the film starts from there. And it's just this shocking thing that happens from filmmaking. And so a shot like that and an opening like that can tell an enormous amount to the audience and of what's going on. So I love how you handled what you did in your film.
Well, and I think one of the things is that our kids are being trafficked all the time. Like the percentages of people watching pornography and then the percentages of kids being trafficked, it's not what we think, where that's why I wanted to show what's going on in America. It's very rarely somebody being taken. That's a very rare case. The usual cases are it's someone they know, trust, and have a reason to have a relationship with. And it seems like a good thing at the start. So it could be someone that they're a boyfriend or girlfriend for 6 months, and that person is trafficking. It could be someone close to their own age. A lot of kids are being trafficked by other kids. And so I wanted to wake up America to the fact that the trafficking that's happening here is a lot of times happening where kids are actually just making one mistake, and what happens is they get caught in the shame of it. They get blackmailed by the trafficker. So what I would say to anybody, if you can be that one safe, caring adult, we need to be the safe, caring adults for people struggling with pornography. If over 50% of pastors are caught in pornography, struggling with pornography, over 50% is the statistic, where do they go? They lose their job if they tell anyone, but they need help. And if they don't tell anyone, their addiction will expedite, and will get worse and worse and worse, which is all of the people buying. It might just start out watching, then buying, and buying children. We don't want that, right? But how do we help the pastor without his, can we be? So if we can be each individual a safe, caring adult, Raising Hope, the founder, says it takes one caring adult to change the life of a child. And I like to say it takes one caring adult to change the life of grown-up children as well, because we need to be those compassionate people, because we're all broken. We're all going to blow it. And if we can be safe, that's the best way to keep your kid from being trafficked. It's the best way to stop this epidemic, is if we can be loving toward the trafficker. Like, everyone wants to point a finger at the Epstein or whatever. Look, his island was full of people. It's not just him. He went down, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We have to be grace-filled, especially as believers, because if we aren't, we won't ever stop this. We can't point fingers because we are the problem, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're winding up here with a podcast. One final question, and that is, filmmakers out there are going to be watching this podcast, listening to this podcast around the world, and they are right with you. They know that this is a huge epidemic problem that's happening not only here in the United States, but globally, all over. Where, as a Christian, as a believer in Jesus, who understands that this is not the world we live in, that he created, and that it's a world that is sinful and evil, and they would like to create a project, what would be the first beginning step that you could say to them? And how can you encourage them in their faith in making that happen? The Bible says, seek first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added. So they have this burning desire to make a film on a social issue that is really they're passionate about. It may not be trafficking. It may be helping children who are being aborted. Maybe it's helping men and women who are being abused somewhere. What would you say is your final comment to encourage their lives and where they might begin?
Well, I think everybody that God made has a testimony, right? We all have our reason and our gifting, right? So God says, I'm made a certain way, you're made another way. It's the body, right? So check in with him. I would say prayer. I think during COVID, when we shot this, and one of the things that happened for me is God slowed my life down, because I tend to spin. I tend to do too much. And I started memorizing scripture. And the more I spent time in his word, and the more I spent time in prayer, the more clear I got on everything that he had for me. And so what I've started doing is every week going to the beach, because I live in California. I'm so fortunate. And just having a date with God where it's just us, my Sabbath with him alone. So I'd highly recommend, like all of us, right? We all need it. And we all have a testimony. He uniquely designed each of us to tell stories, and our stories. So what is it that he created you to do? And right now I'm working on another film called The Journey, and it was inspired by Pilgrim's Progress, but it was because I used to read that book to my kids, and it was about our journey as Christians and how we walk that journey. And I think, I just encourage you to step out in faith. Also, a lot of times we feel like, oh, I could blow it. Maybe God's not in this. And I just think he can redirect our steps. So we just keep praying. And I would highly recommend getting a prayer team behind you. I am part of the Hollywood Prayer Network. I'm part of Influence Women. Join Influence Women. Get involved if you're not already, if you're listening and not involved, because it's a network of people that you can collaborate with. And then and just go for it and do what God has for you. Life is short on this earth, and just shine as brightly as you can. Just thanks so much for listening to me. And I hope that each of you that's listening, just has an amazing blessing from this, that you'll just live out your life for God, whatever he has for you to do, your journey. And bless us all through that.
Love that. Thank you, Janet, so much for being with us today. Your words have empowered so many women today, I know. And we are cheering you on as Wake Up, the official movie is coming out, and we can now download that and get copies of that and pass that around, so that we can help in sharing and the story that you've portrayed in that film, and help to to end the trafficking situation that's happening all over the world, and encouraging and bringing people back together to fight this horrible evil that is really proliferating our world and in our culture today. So thank you so much for being brave and challenging all of us today with the work that you've done. We're so thrilled to have you with us today, and so appreciative. So for all of our listeners, thanks so much for joining us today, and stay tuned for the next Influence Women podcast. Well, thanks for joining us today on the Influence Women podcast. We had such a great conversation with Janet Craig, and we're so thrilled and pleased that we were able to get her on the podcast to talk about her recent film, Wake Up. You know, it's a film about trafficking and how we can fight against it. So, as a subscriber to this channel, pass it on. Click and like us, and then ring the notification bell so that you hear and know about our next one. But pass this one on. We want to stop the trafficking industry around the world and culture today. So be a part of the Influence Women podcast, and we'll see you next time.